and I just, anyway,
All right, better make it good.
anyway, thank you very much. But some of you have heard the initial story about the starting of the office, but you know, Jack and I, basically the firm we were with was falling apart. The two senior partners hated each other. And so they split up and the firm was going to dissolve. And so Jack and I said, well, we'll stick together. And so we made the decision to form our own firm. And on March 1st, that's exactly what we did. When we walked into the door of our first office, which is in what was then called the Minnesota Federal Building, located on 6th and Marquette. I don't know what the building is called now, and it's been completely rebuilt. But we walked into our offices on the 4th floor, and the people that had preceded us in that unit had done a remarkable job in investing in recarpeting the entire office with lime green shag carpet. And there's only one word that accurately describes it, and that word is gross. We had we had maybe 1,000 square feet, and the reception room was furnished with old retired furniture that Jack had stored in his basement rather than taking to the junkyard. And so that furniture decorated our reception room. And the only good thing to say about that furniture is that it was better looking than the carpeting.
Perspectives. Yeah.
Each of us kicked in $1,000. Jack contributed, besides the wonderful reception room furniture, he also contributed 2 desks, one which had belonged to his father and another that belonged to his brother. And so we had to buy one more lawyer desk for Mike McDonough, and we had to buy a secretarial desk and office equipment. And shortly before March 1st, we went out to St. Paul Book and Stationery along with Mary Humphrey, who was our first employee, and she was our secretary, administrator, office manager, whatever. And we went and picked out, we had our $3,000 that we brought with us. And we bought the office furniture and all the supplies that Mary thought we would need. And we had, this is true story, we had $1 left. And we'd forgotten to buy paper clips, and we bought 1 box of paper clips that we divvied up 4 ways, and everybody got a quarter of a box of paper clips. And we immediately adopted a policy that all paper clips coming into the office from outside were confiscated. They were to be confiscated, and Mary Humphrey was to divide them equally around the office so we wouldn't have to waste more money on paper clips. We were dead broke, let me tell you. I had 2 children, 3 months old and 2 years old. Jack had 4 children. Neither of our wives worked, as was customary in those days. There really weren't any jobs for women outside of clerical and administrative jobs. Professional jobs for women basically almost didn't exist then. And so women didn't work, and our wives didn't work, and we didn't have any money. And we had 6 kids between us. So it was very scary times. Jack and I both sold our cars. And as I've often said, basically what we did is we ate our cars, because that is where we got the money to feed ourselves. The finances, we came to the office that day with just tremendous hope and enthusiasm, and both of us were just determined to make this work. But the challenges were really enormous, aside from the fact that we were dead broke. We had enough work. We were able to bring enough work with us to keep the 3 of us busy half-time. So the bad news is that wasn't going to work. And we had to get new clients, and we had to get new clients quickly, or the whole thing was going to collapse, because we couldn't go indefinitely without earning some money. And the good news is, though, when you're only busy 50% of the time, you got lots of time for marketing. And so we really went to work marketing, and within a year, we had enough new clients that we were all at least busy. They weren't all very good clients, but we were all at least we were all busy. And the other challenge back in those days was all of our initial clients were insurance companies. And back in those days, believe it or not, insurance companies would not accept what we called interim bills. They would only accept bills when the file was completely closed. So if a file was open for 2 years, you had work in process on that file invested in costs and expenses. Someone wouldn't let you send bills for costs. Some would let you send bills for costs, but not for time. And others, you've just foot the bill for the cost too. So here we are, dead broke, and we couldn't bill files. And the files that we started closing right away, most of the money on those files had to go back to our prior firm, because the money was all earned when we were at the other firm. And so the amount was our share in those early files was just peanuts. And so Jack and I went a full 6 months without seeing a penny. That was not one paycheck for 6 months. After that, we started getting small paychecks, but sporadically. And it wasn't really for a whole year that we were able to get regular paychecks, but even then it wasn't at the level we'd been at when we started the firm. So things were really difficult financially, and we spent an awful lot of time really trying to build up the firm. We wanted to grow the firm, and this is interesting. Jack and I both committed to growing the firm slowly, because firms that have grown too fast have usually failed. You grow too fast, you make mistakes. And a lot of mistakes that are made by law firms are fatal. Law firms are actually very fragile organizations. You don't have a product that kind of unites everybody. Everybody is their own little product. And so the glue that holds law firms together is much thinner than the glue that holds other business entities together. And so it's pretty fragile entities. And so we wanted to grow slowly. And the goal was to grow 1 lawyer per year. Well, there were 2 of us then, and there's 52 now. I mean, here we are. I mean, did our dream come true or what? You know? Yeah, so that's really cool. I want to tell you a story about the first female lawyer that we hired. This was a story that I'll never forget, and I hope nobody in this room will ever forget it either. This was, I don't remember the exact date, but it was in the late 70s. And we were interviewing for a position, and we had 4 finalists. 3 of the finalists were women, and 1 was a man. And we brought them all in at 2-hour segments during the course of the day. And at the end of the day, when we were finished interviewing all these people, 4 secretaries came into my office and closed the door. And let me tell you something, that anytime anybody ever came into my office and closed the door, I knew that this was not good news. It was guaranteed not to be good news. And so I grit my teeth and was ready for whatever the onslaught was. And here's what they told me. You won't believe this. They told me these women, they'd elected a spokeswoman, and they said that they'd all gotten together, and they decided that none of them would be willing to work for a woman lawyer. So we just want you to know, if you hire a woman, none of us will work for her. And I thought, I could not believe it. I mean, I absolutely could not believe it. You would think that they would be cheering on a fellow woman to let her help her advance her career. And it was the exact opposite. This was absolute total gender discrimination, woman against woman. And I could not believe it. I still can't believe it to this day, to be honest with you. But I remember staring them down, and I said, you know, what you're asking me to do is illegal, and I will not violate the law. And I also said, you know what? the law schools are all across the country now are filling up with women, and you persist in this notion that you're not going to work for another woman. It won't be long before you won't have a job. I meant to imply right now, if you we did hire a woman, and I remember I was Sally Neary. I remember talking to Sally, and I said, you know, I told her what had happened, and we assigned her to one of the women who'd been in my office and said she wouldn't work for her. And I said, if you notice anything at all that this woman, this secretary is not providing you 100% service, you let me know, because I'll fix it for you. And I was pretty serious about that. But I just couldn't believe it. I actually learned something that day, though, because I have learned that even to this day, there's discrimination by women against other women. I think women are harder on each other than men are, and I think it's too bad. Might even be the reason why Hillary Clinton was not president of the United States. She didn't get the women vote. Anyway, that's another story. But I thought you'd like to know that. Let's talk a little bit about technology. This is what you were saying. What it was like. I want to tell you a little bit about what it was like to practice law back then. I'm sure you all know there were no computers, obviously. We didn't have calculators. There were no photocopy machines. You couldn't photocopy anything. You couldn't make a copy of anything. You could theoretically use a camera and take a picture, but you'd have to take the film down to a developer, and then he'd develop it. It'd come up back on photograph paper, and it was very expensive, and no one ever did that. But there was no way of copying anything. There were no Post-it notes. Small thing, I suppose. And let me give you an example of what this meant in terms of discovery. We had no paper, we had no portable dictaphones either. So I had a dictaphone on my desk that was a desktop model, and it was a big thing like this, and it had a rubber tube, and you'd insert this rubber tube and clamp it down, and then you'd talk into it, and it would record like on a record. These things tended to tear, and of course, if they tore, then that was the end of it. But you couldn't; they weren't really portable, and they had to plug in. So anyway, let me just tell you about how discovery went back in those days. I had a products liability case, and there was a whole pile of documents. We'd done a document request, and so they took us into the basement of this at this corporate headquarters, and mouse infested basement, I might add. And there were all these boxes that, boxes and boxes and boxes full of stuff. Okay, so now what are you going to do with all those boxes? You read them, and then you find something you like, and then what? Well, there were people there guarding, I can tell you that. So the only option you had was to handwrite notes. You didn't have cell phone or iPads, or you'd handwrite a note about the date of the document, who authored it. You'd write all that down by hand. Then you'd put a paper clip on it. We always required that they bring their own paper clips, and then you'd say, all the documents that are paper clipped, we want you to bring them to court, or we want you to bring them to the deposition. And you just hope that they would. I mean, the only way you would know is if they didn't produce a document that corresponded with the note that you had. And then, of course, if they claim that, well, I don't know where you got that note, but I mean, we haven't found that document. Of course, the paper clip could easily have slipped off, right? The paper clips don't stay on very, very easily. So that would be so in terms of discovery, I mean, you couldn't really do much with it. And you'd hope that they'd bring it to court, or they'd bring it to a deposition, but you'd never get to actually have a copy of it. And and some of these documents were long. I mean, imagine what are you going to try to copy the whole thing? I mean, it was. So the good news is that's no longer there, but that now, I mean, we have all these tools that allow us to get all those records, but the bad news is that we now have all those tools so we can get all those records. You know what, to give you a simple example, if I were to have defended a products liability case to a trial, to a conclusion, which I did within a few years of starting to practice, defending a products liability case all the way through a jury trial, I mean, maybe it was $10,000 at the most, you know, maybe. Because you couldn't do all this. What discovery could you do? There wasn't, you couldn't do much. And nowadays, of course, that same trial, my guess it'd probably be at $2 million to try that case today. Same case, same exact case, $10,000. Now it's $2 million. The question that I would ask, and I have asked, and the novel that I wrote was all about this issue, is it worth it? Do we have any better justice today? Are people, our clients or the opposing parties, is anyone happier with the results that we have today with all this discovery, all this expense? Are anyone happier today than they were in 1974 when you couldn't do all this stuff? And my question, my firm belief is people are not only not happier, they're less happy. So the cost of litigation has just skyrocketed, and all this technology has been very good for law firms and very bad for clients. Anyway, that's pretty interesting. I was going to say, you know, comment on, you know, a little bit about why has this firm succeeded. As I said, law firms are very fragile organizations. There's a number of law firms, very large, historic, major firms in Minnesota that have gone under. I mean, Ryder Bennett was an example of a firm that was much larger than we were. Doherty, Rumble, and Butler in St. Paul was one of the oldest firms in Minnesota history. Large firm, and it failed Popham Hague, where Judge Doherty practiced law for many years. I mean, they were growing like crazy, and they failed because they grew too fast, in my opinion. They failed. We all know about the Gisselson Hunter firm, which was an venerable old firm that went by the wayside. You know, lots of firms. I mean, there's been another one is Mernan White in St. Paul is a firm very similar to ours, and they've all failed, but we didn't. So not only have we not failed, but we've thrived. And why is that? And I think it's worth answering questions like that, and it's worth spending some time thinking about it. And I would like to second what John said earlier, that I think the number one reason why firms succeed is by having treating all clients, all people within the firm with kindness and respect. If you treat employees with respect and kindness, they'll like working here. And when they like working here, they'll work harder, and they'll be more productive, and they'll be more creative, and they'll stay. I know we failed in that regard. I know that there are examples of where the firm has not succeeded and has not treated people with the respect that they deserve, but it's been our mantra from day one. And I hope it's still the firm's mantra. John says it is, I believe him. It's really important. You ask yourself, what is the glue that holds law firms together? I remember we hired an outside consultant one year that come in to our firm, and he was a leadership consultant on what it takes to be a good leader. And Lord knows I needed help. I had lots of ideas, but I didn't understand the right way of bringing an idea to fruition. And so we had this consultant come in, and the first question he asked, he interviewed pretty much all of the employees in the firm, and basically asked them, "Why are you here?" And he didn't get very satisfactory answers to those questions. If the answer to that question is, my salary, you know you're in trouble. Because everybody gets recruited. All good employees end up getting recruited by somebody to go somewhere else, and they're always gonna be promising you more money. And that's just the way the recruiting system works. So what keeps you people here? If salary is the only reason anybody's here, this firm is in trouble. So the reason people are here is because they like it here. They respect their fellow coworkers because their coworkers respect them. So I would say number one is that we've always tried to treat people with respect. There's several other factors, but wanted to jump to a couple of other examples, and I'm happy to talk about that further, but it doesn't quite fit into my presentation, which is telling some interesting stories. The other factor that I think is really important is having a vision for the future. It's so easy to just come into the office and pick up your files and work like crazy and finish the file and go home, but you don't really have the luxury of doing that. And if you want to be successful, that is not enough. You have to always ask yourself, where do I want to be in 5 years? Where do I want to be in 10 years? What do I want to be doing in 5 years or 10 years? Where do I want this firm to be in 10 years? The leaders of this firm have to ask that question all the time. Where do we want to be in 10 years? Because the world changes, and it changes very fast. And I'll give you a few examples of how the world has changed fast, and I'll give you some examples of some visionary solutions to some of those problems. The first example I wanted to mention is the home insurance company. Home insurance company was a very important client of mine. They wrote products liability insurance. And that was my primary field. And it was good business, lucrative business. Rates were pretty good. And the cases were interesting. And it was usually a lot of work to conclude the cases. And so it was a good area to be in. One day, home insurance company came to me and said, well, guess what? We're going to take everything in-house. We have an in-house staff already, and we're going to expand our in-house staff, and you guys are too expensive. All of our outside law firms are too expensive, and so you guys are out. We want you to close your files up in 30 days and send them on our way, and we're going to get other lawyers, in-house lawyers, to take care of all that. I thought for a minute, and I said to the guy, I said, well, what, will you give me a chance to prove that you're wrong? And he said, wrong? I said, yeah. I said, I can guarantee I can handle those cases cheaper than you can. And I said, I'll prove it to you. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to add up 100% of all the expenses it costs the home insurance company to maintain in-house counsel. Everything. Lease space, taxes, Social Security, unemployment compensation taxes, everything, every health benefits, fringe benefits, everything, add it all up. And I don't know what the number is right now, but I'll almost guarantee you that I can undercut that number by 20% and do all your business for you. Well, he did it. And I went out and I met with him and I said, well, guess what? I'll do that for 20% less. And he said, really? I said, really? So we became their house counsel. Jim Newborn was the house counsel inside the home insurance company at the time. I said, you know what? I like Jim. I'll take him, but I don't like any of the other lawyers. You do what you want with them, but I'll take Jim, and that's it. They said, well, they didn't care about the other lawyers, and Jim is fine. So that's how we got Jim Newborn. And that's how we got that business. And it stayed. So not only did we not lose a client, we actually gained an enormous amount because home insurance had used several other law firms in town to do their work. And now we got 100% of the work. So it was just a way of when the insurance industry is tough. You got to be, I know it's still a major part of this firm's practice, and dealing with the insurance industry is not easy. They're tough, they're big, and they negotiate hard. And they try to convince you that it's non-negotiable, but it is negotiable if you come up with creative solutions. And so that's one example, and it turned out to be extremely profitable. A few years later, Safeco Insurance Company did the same thing. They're now Liberty Mutual, but at the time it was Safeco, and Safeco did the same thing. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll be your house counsel. And well, how can you be house counsel? Well, I'll say I'll operate under exactly the same rules that all your house counsel all around the country operate on. Whatever the rules are, I'll abide by them. I'll get paid the same way you pay them. Will be exactly the same thing, except we'll be the house counsel. Well, okay, if you can do that. So we saved Safeco Insurance Company for, I don't know, probably another 10 years before Liberty bought them, and then Liberty didn't buy that argument. But you know, it saved an important client, and Safeco also used other law firms, and now we got their business as well. A couple of other examples I wanted to mention was that we had an insurance company by the name of Park Glen. So this was in the days when I was doing liquor liability work, and Park Glen was coming into the state, and I had a reputation as a liquor liability lawyer, and so the underwriter agent recommended that they talk to me, and so the president of Park Glen and I got together and we talked about it all, and I quoted my fees to him, and he said that seems a little high to me, and I also knew that one of his absolute best friends is a lawyer in a competing defense firm in town that he played golf with regularly. And I wasn't as good a golfer as he was, and the two of them were. And at the time, I wasn't a member of Minnetonka, and I couldn't take him anywhere. And so I knew right away that was my competition. And even though he didn't know squat about liquor liability work. But so I said, well, tell you what you tell me, what do you have figured into your calculations as to what your loss ratio, your defense loss ratio is going to be? I mean, what percentage of the earned premiums are you prepared to devote to the defense of these cases? 100% of the defense, all the investigation, all the trial work, everything. What would be a satisfactory number to you? He said 25%. I said, well, then that's fine. I'll do it for 25%. And you pay me 25% of your premiums, and then I'll take care of everything. We'll hire the investigators, and we'll pay the investigators out of the money you send to our account, and we'll manage the cases. You want to try it, we'll try it. If we'll take over the whole thing. And he said, really? I said, really. And so that's how we got that business. So, you finding creative solutions. And then because now we got skin in the game, I went to him and I said, maybe I should have some chats with your underwriters, because I could give them some pretty good underwriting tips on who not to write, because I knew all my loser clients, around the state. And so I went out and met with the client, met with the vice president of underwriting. It was going to be the guy that made all the decisions about what bars they were going to write. I took a map of Minnesota, and I took the circle around the iron range, and I said, any bar in this circle, you don't touch. I tried a case up in the iron range one time, a dram shop case. I didn't finish trying the case. I tried a case, and I asked one of the jurors, I said, so does anyone on this panel have any preconceived notions for any reason at all about whether this guy was drunk in the bar? And then this guy raises his hand. He said, I do. I said, so what's your opinion? Well, he had to be drunk. I said, well, why would you know that? You haven't heard any evidence at all. He said, well, why else would he have gone there? And I thought, well, if that's the attitude in the community, well, first of all, I got that case settled fairly quickly. I mean, I got him kicked off the jury, but it didn't mean that the other jurors didn't feel the same way. They just didn't stand up. And so I got the case settled, and then I circled this area, and they don't write it in there. And then I said, the other thing is rural municipal liquor stores are terrible because they have no incentive to do the right thing. They're run by people that are basically incompetent, and they don't care about anything because they got no skin in the game. The employees don't. And I said, you don't write rural municipal liquor stores either. Well, we did really well. We did, and so we had to have separate books because we were now acting actually as an insurance company. I had some trouble convincing some of my partners that this was a good idea because the firm was now taking a risk. You know, we were acting as an insurance company for the insurance company, and you know, there was a risk associated with that. I said, well, we'll just monitor quickly, you know, and so anyway, we did. We kept the business for 8 years, and during that 8-year period of time, we way exceeded in terms we billed ourselves the hourly rate that he said was too much. We billed ourselves that hourly rate and paid ourselves out of the trust fund that we set up. And at the end of 6 out of the 8 years, there was quite a bit of money left over that we declared bonuses on. And 2 years we lost money, but not a ton. So it turned out to be just a huge boon. But then he thought it was too much of a boon. And so he said, well, we're going to have to change that. You're going to go down to 20%. And I said, no, I'm not. So he gave it to his buddy in the other law firm. I said, well, I'm not going to do this to lose money. And but you know, creative way of thinking about it. You know, you want to try to find a solution. Isn't that what we as lawyers are trained to do? Clients come with a problem, and the goal of the law firm is to help solve the problem. You know, it's not like our goal isn't to tell clients you can't do this. Our goal is to tell clients how they can get something accomplished in a different way. And so thinking out of the box, always thinking out of the box, will always prove successful.
I never would have guessed that.
One more about that, and then we'll open it up for everything. One more example. The best client I ever had was a company called Capital Safety. As it turned out, a very close friend of mine was hired to become the CEO of Capital Safety. So we happened to play golf together one day, and I knew that Capital Safety, I knew from what the company was, it manufactured fall protection equipment. It was the #1 manufacturer of fall protection equipment in the world. And I knew that had to be just tons of products liability lawsuits for the company. And so I took them out for a little round of golf, and I said, so Jim, how's the insurance situation working for you guys? It's just terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. We've got AIG as a carrier, and all they want to do is settle cases. And the more they settle, the more we get sued. And the more we get sued, the more they raise their premiums. And they won't listen to us when we say we don't want to settle the case. And I said, well, Jim, you know what you ought to do is you ought to self-insure the first $250,000, $300,000 worth of work. Interested in that? Well, how would that work? I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll bring a friend of mine from Marsh McLennan. We'll come down to your office and we'll make a proposal for how you can self-insure your business and just insure the excess business. And then you can retain the right to control counsel as a part of self-insuring your business. And so we went down, we made the presentation. Marsh and McLennan wrote the new policy, and I got 100% of the work. And we had it for probably 20 years. And it was a turnkey operation. I mean, I did everything. I mean, from the minute that they heard about a lawsuit, I'd get on a plane and fly to wherever it was till the case finally was resolved. I did 100% of the whole thing, reported to the president of the company. And it was just a wonderful relationship. And fortunately for me, 3M bought the company the day I retired, and I would have lost the business anyway because 3M was never going to hire me. So anyway, those are just examples. People, I just encourage everybody, and it's not just lawyers. I mean, everybody, no matter what your job is, think out of the box. Think, how can I do this job better? What is another way of doing something that is more productive, that will save money or will improve my life? I mean, what are some of the ways that you can do? Just always be thinking ahead. don't think you get stuck at your desk all day long, just working the case. You're not doing service to your own career and you're not doing the service to your firm. You don't have the luxury of just sitting around working on your files. Think about where is the future going? And I guarantee this has only been 50 years. And you think about what this, I just told you, what the law firm looked like 50 years ago. And 50 years is a relatively short period of time, although now that I'm 80, it seems like it's a very short period of time. So just think out of the box. Think creatively, think visionary. Always do strategic planning individually and as a firm. Don't shortcut that.
When did you know the firm was gonna last 50?
Well, when we first started getting regular paychecks, I thought this was gonna work. You know, Jack and I are polar opposites. I'm just an aggressive, I'm gonna get it done now kind of guy. I mean, get out of my way, I'm gonna do it. This is where we're going. Jack is calm, laid back, and let's talk about this, let's think it through. And, you know, have you thought about, you know, so we're perfect match to each other because he kept me out of most of the hot fires I would have gotten myself into. And without me, he wouldn't have gone forward as the way it was. So I was the guy that was pushing to go forward, and Jack was the guy that pushed it to go forward right.
Awesome.
And so we had even though that we were really polar opposites, we had enormous respect for each other. And we had, well, during the first year of our existence, we had all of us gathered at in our office around one of the desks, and we all brought bag lunches, and we sat and had lunch together and talked about everything. And then, you know, after we actually could afford to go out and get lunch once in a while, Jack and I always had lunch once a week, at least once a week. And we did that for probably 25 or 30 years. And, you know, we just would talk to one another, and the personal relationship that we developed and the trust we had for each other. I think I knew pretty soon after that this firm was going to survive the eons. There were threats along the way. There were mistakes along the way. I had this big thing about wanting to do mergers to grow a little bit more, and we did 4 mergers and they all failed, and they all cost us varying amounts of money. And so got out of the merger business, but Jack wasn't able to talk me out of that. But no, it was I thought we were going to be successful. I thought we had the right mix.
Awesome. What about you? Do you have a favorite client?
Well, I mean, as I said, capital safety was. I like the lineup too because you know, representing doctors, both my children and both my sons and both my daughter-in-laws are physicians, so it's kind of nice to have had a connection to the medical field when I can actually contribute to dinner table conversations. And so I enjoyed representing doctors and nurses in hospitals, but capital safety was really my favorite client because they just let me do whatever I wanted to.
Awesome. Awesome. One question that we received is, where was your office when you were here?
In this building?
Yeah.
Well, Picalo's office. It was neater then.
But much less welcome.
Yeah, I kept the door open. I didn't want anybody to shut the door when they came in, I'll tell you that.
I know that.
I do have other questions that were submitted, but does anybody in the room have a question for Lindsay? Okay. What was the hardest client you ever brought in?
The hardest client.
You just had to keep after it.
The hardest client. There was in those early years, you know, if it could breathe and get in the front door, I'd handle it. I did some criminal work back then because that I needed to, you know, I needed to be busy, and so I took criminal cases, and there were some total sleazeballs and all this show up here. I don't know, there were a lot of clients that, I'm not gonna name names, but there was a client that I just thought treated me totally unfairly and wouldn't, I mean, they didn't pay their bills, and then they wouldn't go 6 months or 9 months before paying the bills. I'd be calling them and they'd give me a runaround, and then after, even then, they would say, okay, well, there's a 20% discount. And so I got really upset when they'd done that to me more than once. And so I just called them up and I said, I want you to take all the files that you have in my office, and I want you to have somebody come and pick them up and get them out of here, because I'm not gonna work for you anymore. It took, and some of my partners didn't like that, but I wasn't gonna do the work. Why would I want them to do that kind of work?
When did you write your book, and what inspired you to write it? I know you touched on that a little bit earlier.
So I had a novel called The Litigators that was published in 2005. It won a small award. We sold about 3,500 copies. And it was about a products liability case, and it was about biotechnology gone, arguably biotechnology gone bad, causing severe injuries to this lady. But I wrote the book because I wanted to express my disapproval of the direction that the litigation field was going. It's way too expensive. I had occasion to spend an evening with a law professor, believe it or not, in China. And I didn't even know they had lawyers in China. And but so I just asked him a hypothetical question. And I said, so what happens if there's a guy riding down the street in his bicycle and a car comes on the cross and he's speeding and a guy's drunk and knocks the bicycle over, a bicyclist over, wrecks the bike, and a guy gets a broken leg and can't work? So what would happen in the Chinese system? He said, well, I don't even understand your question. What do you mean, what would happen? I said, well, what would happen was broken leg, you know? Well, he'd go to the doctor, and we have national health insurance here, health coverage, and so they'd fix his leg for free, and then he'd go back to work. Well, but he'd lose time from work. Well, no, okay, his salary would continue while he's not working, and so. But what about all of the pain and suffering that he's caused? You know what his response was? He says, well, for pain and suffering, we have acupuncture. I'll give you another example. This capital safety, you know, my absolute best client, I handle, if there was a loss anywhere in the world, I knew about it usually within hours. Because they were alert. They always found out about loss, mostly these people that were killed. So we'd find out about it very fast. And so they wrote, these are round numbers, but say they wrote 50% of their business, 50% of their sales were in the United States. And then the rest of the 50% was all around the world, but heavily into industrialized nations: Canada, England, Australia, South Africa, Europe. And so they sold exactly identical products in all these companies, exactly identical. And I represented the company for 17 years. How many cases do you think we got from any other country other than the United States? 0. Why is that? Is that the way we ought to be spending our money? Think of the amount of money that is spent on resolving disputes with one another in this country. Is that really, are we getting anything for that money? I mean, the same people had to get hurt in Canada and in England and in Europe and Australia and all these places. Nothing. People didn't think like that. So is the United States better off because of all this? That was a question I was asking in the litigators. That was the reason for writing the book, other than just, I dreamed of writing a novel all my life, and I wanted to have a purpose for writing it. So if you can still get the litigators, a few copies still available on Amazon.
And there's a slightly less famous author that copied your book.
Yeah, so John Grisham, this is a fun story. John Grisham came out with a book that he called The Litigators also. And you can't get a copyright on a title of a book. So, I could publish a book tomorrow and call it The Great Gatsby, and it'd be just fine, but anyway, he came out with this book called The Litigators, very, very inferior to mine. And it came out about 2 years after mine came out. Well, it was about the time when sales had plummeted, I was getting, there were like 1 or 2 books about a month, a year and a half or 2 years afterwards. And so, the royalties that I were getting, I would get a royalty check every quarter for about $5, and then when his book came out, on Amazon, his book is printed right up above, and my book is right underneath his. And so they're both called The Litigators. Now you can see the same thing in Amazon. When you go shop at Amazon, you can see the same thing, and it'll be sold by different people at different prices. And so a ton of people thought they were buying his book and bought my book. And so my sales went through the roof, for about 90 days, Some people actually, there's one review written on Amazon by this guy that says, he writes in and he says, I've read all of John Grisham's books, and this is a really good book, but it's just so different from so it was really classic. But yeah, so I need somebody else to write another book called The Litigators. I've written a new novel now too, but I'm busy collecting rejection letters. So nowadays the business has changed, and it's virtually impossible to get published nowadays unless you have your own platform. The first question publishers ask me is, how many 100,000 followers do you have on Facebook? Well, I don't do Facebook. Oh, see you later. And, they want you to sell your own book. You got to have a platform. You have to have name recognition, because you're a celebrity of some type, or you have to be really active on social media. And if you're not, it really doesn't matter how good your book is. They won't publish it. They want you to sell your own book now. So this is even the mainstream New York publishers, they are not taking risks on hardly anybody. It'd be a very rare book that even the big publishing houses will take a risk on now. So my chances of getting published are probably almost non-existent. Maybe just about the same as my chance of pitching for the Yankees in the World Series. But and I could self-publish it, but I ask myself really why, and I've already seen the book published, and actually
Was
published.
that
by
Kathy
somebody else.
asking you, or was that yourself asking?
No, me. I mean, why do I want to do it? I mean, if I want to, I can publish it just to have it published, and then it's there.
Yeah.
But, do I want to spend a few $1,000s to have a book published to look and see, here's my book, cute, right?
Number 2.
And so, and I don't really want to, I'm not in the business of wanting to go out and sell my own book. I mean, writing the book was fun, but going out and actually having to sell the damn thing, I mean, seems like a lot of work to me. So.
What's this book about?
This is a literary murder mystery.
Okay.
It's a good read. I've had everybody that's read it has raved about it, but it doesn't really matter in the publishing industry anymore.
We'll get you on Facebook, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Okay, so wrapping things up, anyone else, comments, questions, stories to share? Appreciate your time. Appreciate Krista and Roberta helping us put this all together. Very informative hour, Lindsay, with you. We appreciate it. Looking forward to the party this afternoon.
Well, I just can't tell you how big a day this is for me. You know, I mean, I feel like I'm on top of the world to be here and celebrate with you because this was my lifetime work. I'd say everybody here. I mean, it just about brings tears to my eyes. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good stories.
Thank you.
Yeah, very inspirational. I know. Come back.